Today, we're going to get into the psychology of something I'm willing to bet you know all too well: replaying old conversations over and over in your head. So, have you ever been there, just stuck in this loop, replaying a conversation, maybe from yesterday, maybe from years ago? Well, you're definitely not alone. And the reason why we do this is actually way more complex and fascinating than you think. I mean, does this hit close to home or what? It's that classic moment, right? Your mind turns into this full-blown courtroom, and you're on trial for some tiny social misstep that, let's be honest, probably no one else on Earth even remembers. So let's really dig in and decode what's going on here. Okay, so let's start with that classic 3 a.m. replay. You might just chalk it up to overthinking, but what's really happening is this deep, deep psychological hunt, a hunt for closure. And see, this isn't just anxiety talking. At its core, it's your brain desperately trying to figure out why you weren't that perfect version of yourself in that one moment. It's this really sophisticated and totally exhausting search for a sense of finality that the real world just doesn't offer up very often. But here's where it gets really interesting. This whole internal investigation, it's not actually about what the other person thought of you. Nope. The psychology behind this points to something way, way deeper. See, when you're replaying that conversation in your head, you're not just watching a movie of the past. You are an active editor. You're trying to rewrite the script, to rehearse a version of yourself that just nailed it, the perfect comeback, the perfect timing, the perfect impression. And neuroscience actually gives us a big clue about why this is happening. It's something called the default mode network. You can think of it as your brain's built-in engine for introspection, for daydreaming, for thinking about yourself. And for those of us who get stuck in these replay loops, well, that engine is just running at a much higher, much louder volume. Okay, so what is actually going on inside that repetition loop? Let's break down the specific patterns your brain is running through when it gets stuck on some past interaction. So the first pattern we see is what we can call the idealized gap. On one side, you've got your actual self, who you really were in that moment. And on the other side, you've got this idealized self, who you think you should have been. That replay loop, that's your brain just obsessing over the space between those two versions of you. But wait, here is a really crucial reframe. This is not a flaw, far from it. This whole behavior is actually a sign that you have really high internal standards. You're not the kind of person who settles for a good enough social performance because you genuinely value things like depth and authenticness. All right, the second pattern has everything to do with how your memory works. And here's the kicker. Your memory is not a video camera. It doesn't just record and play back. It's reconstructive. That means every single time you recall that conversation, you're not actually remembering the original event. You're remembering the last time you remembered it. And each time you do, it gets a fresh coat of paint, usually a nice thick coat of anxiety. And again, this is not a defect. It's actually a byproduct of a high-functioning nervous system that's just trying to find meaning in everything. The strange part is, your brain is kind of gaslighting you, presenting this warped, anxiety-polluted version of the truth as it scrambles to make sense of what happened. And all of this brings us to what we can call the control loop. This is the cycle in action. Step 1, you replay the moment. Step 2, you analyze it for every possible error. Step 3, you try to mentally rewrite history. And step 4, you do it all over again, stuck in this loop, convinced that just one more analysis is finally going to crack the code. But why on earth do we do this? Well, believe it or not, it's a misaligned survival instinct. Way back in our evolutionary past, being able to correctly predict social outcomes was a life-or-death skill for staying safe within the tribe. The problem is, your internal system hasn't quite learned how to turn that search for control feature off, even when the stakes today are, a whole lot lower. So let's shift gears for a second. What if we looked at these cognitive patterns not as struggles, but as evidence? Evidence of some pretty powerful underlying strengths. A lot of people who do this also experience something called metacognition. The best way to describe it is like having a second browser tab open in your brain during every single conversation. It's just constantly running in the background, monitoring your own performance, your tone of voice, the other person's microexpressions. And it can be super distracting, right? But it's also a sign of really high intelligence and empathy. You are processing social data at a frequency that most people just ignore. It's almost like a cognitive superpower, even if that superpower sometimes makes you forget someone's name literally 2 seconds after they told you. Now, this is a really crucial distinction to make, the difference between rumination and reflection. Rumination is that toxic circular loop we've been talking about. It basically preserves a negative emotion like a mosquito trapped in amber. But reflection, that's productive. It has a clear beginning, a middle, and an end, and it actually results in a lesson learned. So why do we get stuck in rumination? It's because that old survival mechanism is calibrated to see social threats as if they were physical threats. Your body literally reacts to social uncertainty, something as simple as an awkward pause, as if it were a predator hiding in the bushes, and it floods your system with all those toxic stress chemicals. So understanding all of this is the first step. But it brings us to the most important part of this whole journey, figuring out how to find a path towards self-compassion and finally letting the past rest. Because really, what keeps that loop spinning more often than not is a self-compassion deficit. Think about it. You hold yourself to this impossible standard of perfection that you would never expect from a friend. And doing that traps your brain in this endless cycle of punishing what it sees as a defective self, all because of one tiny mistake. So here's the big takeaway I want you to walk away with. These mental habits, these things you see as struggles, they are not flaws. They're just patterns. And they're waiting for you to understand them with a little bit of curiosity and a whole lot of kindness. And that version of you, the one from that conversation 6 months ago or 6 years ago, that person was never, ever required to be flawless. They were just doing the absolute best they could with the tools and the awareness they had at that exact moment in time. So I'm going to leave you with one last question to think about. What if that person, the one you keep putting on trial in the court of your mind, what if they were already enough, just as they were?
If this felt like a mirror into your own mind, hit that like button. Comment, share, and subscribe so we can reach more people. Thank you for watching.